welcome to Rise with Crossroads Clubhouse and Monroe Community Mental Health Authority. I'm one of your hosts today, Stephen Pietzak, along with Desi. And just so you know, pretty soon it's going to be the Desi show, okay, because she's going to be the main host. So today we have a special guest with us. It's Lisa Graham. She's the Executive Director of Monroe Community Mental Health Authority, I'm sorry, not awareness.
Both, awareness and authority.
Yes. So, what do you think of when it comes to March? Desi?
Usually I'm thinking of something green like St. Patrick's Day.
Me too. There's another thing I want you to be aware of now. National Developmental Disability Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. We are tongue-tied today, just so you know. So March is National Developmental Disability Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. And today, our guest, Lisa, is going to talk about that when she's going to get some shots fired at her from Desi. We put her under pressure a little bit today. So go ahead, Desi, take it away.
Okay. So, Lisa, what is intellectual developmental disability, or IDD, stand for?
Mm-hmm. So IDD is intellectual and developmental disabilities. That's what it stands for. And IDD can be something like that impacts a person's learning, their ability to learn and think. And those would be things like autism, things like ADD, ADHD. If it's a developmental disability, that impacts the way that a person develops. Their kind of reaches their milestones, if you will. So things like autism, like Down syndrome, spina bifida, cerebral palsy, those would be considered developmental disabilities.
Okay. So how is IDD diagnosed?
So typically, it's diagnosed early in life, and it could be noticed right away at birth, or it could be that as a child is growing, they're not reaching those milestones, like maybe they're not crawling when typically a child would crawl, or they're not speaking, or they're just having, parents will notice some difficulties. And so you can go to your pediatrician, and there are different assessments depending on what they're kind of testing for. Autism has very specific assessments. Fetal alcohol syndrome has very specific assessments. But normally we can diagnose it by determining just which things that a person is having a hard time doing independently. And so usually diagnosed pretty early.
Okay. So what can cause ID?
Yeah, so many things, and it's really hard to know. I mean, that's what a lot of people research, spend a lot of time like, what causes autism? And there are lots of theories about it, but it's really generally something that's happening during the time the baby's developing, and it just depends on what disorder you're talking about or which disability, but it could be anything from heredity to just some genetic thing that happened. It's really difficult to pin down what any one specific cause.
So are there any warning signs, or does a pediatrician test for these things?
Sometimes when a woman is pregnant, you can test. I know there's a test that you can determine if the baby is likely going to be born with Down syndrome. There are indicators for that. But everything else, again, it's just usually once we get the baby here and we're so excited, and really mom or dad or grandma start to notice that something's just not developing kind of typically. And we just say typically because there's no real normal, right?
Right. And what is the difference between ID and DD?
Yeah, so that's what we were talking about. Intellectual disability is more like something that impacts a person's thinking or their ability to learn. And the developmental disability might impact their physical body more, like cerebral palsy, in fact, impacts a person's muscles and their body. Intellectual disability is something that maybe is a learning disability, or something that just impairs a person's way of thinking and learning.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did want to say, if I could say, Desi, that National Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month was started, do you know when it was started? In 1987, President Reagan declared March as National Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month because he really wanted to show that people with disabilities can and should be in the communities. You know, years ago, I say many years ago, but it really wasn't all that many years ago, if a person had a developmental disability, they weren't usually in the community. There weren't programs, there weren't services for people. Sometimes parents were told to just take the child and go to some institution and drop that person at the institution and don't go visit him or her because it'll just be sad for everybody. And so people with disabilities historically have not been allowed to be in the community. And so what community mental health does, which is so great, is we provide services and treatments so that people with disabilities can be as involved in their community as they want to be, just like anybody else. They can get jobs, they can go to school, they can you know, just integrate and be really fully productive members of the community. And that is so, so important, not only for the person, but for us as a community, because we are a better community when we include everyone.
Yes, that is really important, to have people with disabilities to be more included than how it was back then.
Yes, yes. There's so many people who have so much to offer, you know, the world, and we are just so much better when we can give people those opportunities.
Yes. So, what service would do you offer for IDD?
That's a great question, and like I said, we have a lot of services for people with IDD diagnosis. So we have everything from skill building centers. So what normally happens is a person who has an intellectual or developmental disability, they can be in school up until they're 26 years old. So the school time is extended, but we start thinking around 16, 18, like transitioning into becoming an adult. And so we start talking with them about what they want their adult years to look like. And so doing skill building services that help people to learn how to do all kinds of things like stay on task and show up on time to your job, just kind of those soft skills that we all need to learn. So we have skill building programs, a number of those in Monroe County. We also have something called community living supports. So maybe somebody would love to have their own apartment, but they do need some help with certain things. Maybe they need help grocery shopping, or they need help learning to prepare food or do their laundry. We have staff who can come into a person's home, whether it's they're living with family or they want to get their own apartment, and teach them and help them learn to do all of those life skills so that they can be as independent as possible. We also have job development. So if anybody wants to get a job, but maybe they need some help learning how to do the job, a little extra coaching on the job, we have services like that. We have some of the more traditional services like group homes. You know, there are some people whose disabilities really, they require a great deal of care and supervision and treatment. And so those are people who could live in group homes in the community. We have 12 group homes in the community that we support. So a number of people. We serve, in 2022, we served 688 people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and that was both children and adults. So quite a lot. But we do know also that that's only a fraction of the people who really could be getting our help. And so we know there are a lot of people with developmental disabilities who are still home with parents, and they're not getting services. And maybe they don't need services if they're doing great with mom and dad and they're integrating and they're getting out into the community, that's great. But if they're not, we really encourage people to check out the services that we can provide.
So does CMH partner with any of the schools in Monroe County?
Well, we work with, I wouldn't say maybe not a formal partnership, but we work really closely with the ISD and with really any school where kids with developmental disabilities might be transitioned into I think the word mainstream, you know, they're in the traditional classrooms with some support. And so we attend individualized education plans with students, and we try to be a part of all of that. And then especially once they get to that transition age, we really want to help them to think about what adult life is going to look like for them.
Okay. How do you qualify for IDD services?
Yep, so if you call mental health, call our main number, and you just ask, say that you think you would like some services, that you have a disability and you'd like some services, you call and we'll do an assessment, and we'll verify that the person does have a developmental disability or an intellectual disability, and then most of the time a person will have Medicaid. If not, we can help them get hooked up with all of those benefits, and that's it. You come on in and we get you started with a case manager who will help think about all the different areas of life and what specific area that a person might want to have any goals in.
Okay.
Lisa, could you touch on, once a person is admitted to CMH, what the process is once they have a case manager with the IPOS, which is individual plan of service that each consumer has with CMH?
Yeah, so a person will come in, they'll come in through the front door, and we will do that assessment that I talked about. Then they'll be assigned a case manager. That case manager will get to know the person, the family, and really do a thorough assessment of what is this person, what are your goals? And does the person want to get a job? Do they want to be able to get out in the community more? Do they want to make friends? Just really helping them and their families to think about what are the goals, and then what can CMH do to help support those goals. So if I want to get a job but I need to learn some skills, then we can provide some services in skill building or job development. Or if I'd like to get out in the community more, but maybe I have ADD and I'm so impulsive that I'm constantly getting in trouble, then we're going to help learn some skills, maybe some therapy, some medication that can help with those things so that the person can then reach their goals of making friends, getting out in the community, things like that.
Is there any kind of home-based services out there for IDD?
So home-based is really for kids with serious emotional disturbances, and home-based services are really great because they, the therapist and the case managers, they actually go into the child's home multiple times a week. That's the home-based is really like the most intensive array of services to really help kids who are really, really struggling in a lot of ways. So we're out in the homes, 2 to 3 times a week with kids who have those kinds of needs.
And how is it similar to adult services, if there's anything related?
Really, every service that we provide, Desi, it's individualized to the person's needs. So we have different services for different populations, but like in adults with developmental disabilities, they're probably going to get case management. We're going to see them as often as really they need. So sometimes that can be once a month, sometimes it can be once a week if things aren't going really well. We're going to help with case management. We help to link and coordinate with, like I said, almost anything you can think about. We really take a look with the person at everything that they might need. Like, do you have good housing? Okay. Do you have enough money? Are you getting out and socializing in the community? We look at the whole person. Is your health good? Do you need to see a doctor? And we try to put the supports in place and help them identify the supports that they need beyond just us, because we're a piece of it, but we're not the whole thing, right? And so we help them to identify all of the supports that they might need and then get those arranged in a treatment plan, and then the case manager kind of monitors that ongoing to make sure it's all happening the way that we expect it to. That's supporting the person and helping them improve and making sure, measuring that the person is meeting their goals.
Is there any kind of training offered for if needed to learn about IDD?
Yeah, you know what, that's a great question, and I think that would be something that would be helpful if people had that training. We don't, I mean, the people who come to work for us already have that training, but I can tell you, I think as a social worker, and I went through a bachelor's and a master's program, and there weren't a lot of classes. There was not a lot of training about working with individuals with developmental disabilities. So that's something I think colleges and universities could offer more for people who are going into this field. I know there are some organizations locally here in Monroe, Disability Network and Monarch of Monroe. Those are two great organizations that probably can provide some training and support.
Okay. What are wraparound services?
So wraparound is a specific service that we offer at Mental Health for kids, and really these are kids who have who are involved in multiple systems. So maybe they're involved with protective services, and they're involved with CMH, and they go to school, and they might have an IEP. And so what we do there is we try to wrap every service that's available in the community, every resource that could help build this family and this child up. We call it wraparound because we're literally trying to wrap all of this support around the child and the family to help them be successful and thrive.
And if someone with IDD or DD were to be in a crisis, how would you define a crisis?
Yeah, so a crisis when it comes to IDD IDD, it's really the same as any of us would define a crisis. When something's happening where the person is really unable to be safe in the community for whatever reason. Sometimes people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, because they have challenges in the way that they process information or learn, sometimes they can get really easily frustrated, and they might not always be able to speak it, articulate it, right? And so then sometimes we say that behavior is communication. And so if I can't tell you what's wrong, sometimes my behavior is going to show you what's wrong, and that's going to put me at risk, right? Maybe I'm hitting my head, or I'm hitting somebody else, or I'm engaging in some behavior that is trying to communicate that I'm hurting, I'm in trouble, but that behavior is making me unsafe or somebody else unsafe. So we try to get psychologists involved to help people learn, to help train the people who are working with and supporting the individual, whether it's a parent or a paid staff, so that we can help the person learn to communicate better so that they're not hurting themselves. But if it gets really bad, then the same thing with anybody else. We're going to do an assessment. We're going to see, does this person maybe need medications that can be helpful? Do they need to be in a different environment, living in a different place where we can help keep them safer? Do they need more support in their home in the way of paid staff? So we look at all of those things to help determine what's the best way to help a person who's in a crisis.
Okay. So just like someone with IDD that might be in a crisis is similar to someone with a mental illness, it's similar to either or?
Yeah, so I mean, you think about a person with a mental illness who's having a behavioral health crisis, probably it's something about their symptoms, their depression or their bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, where they're just not able to keep themselves safe. And sometimes it might mean that other people aren't safe around them. And those are the biggest crises, that we want to look for.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Lisa, I know this question doesn't pertain just to IDD or DD, but I know you're trained in mental health first aid, and I know the agency is starting to train more staff and are providing this training to the Monroe Police Department and other entities. Can you explain what mental health first aid is and if it will be offered into the community?
Yeah, mental health first aid is great. It's an international curriculum, and mental health first aid, if you think about CPR and first aid training that you might have, that helps you to deal with somebody's physical health emergency until the professionals get there, right? Mental health first aid helps people learn how to identify symptoms of a mental illness and to identify a mental health crisis early and to intervene and provide support and help until the professionals can get there. And the professionals might be just a police officer or a paramedic, or it could be a crisis worker, a mental health therapist who arrives to help and provide support. But it helps people to learn to identify all those early symptoms so that they can help maybe get the person to treatment and care before it gets really out of control and before it becomes a crisis. Also then, once it's become a crisis, like somebody having a panic attack or somebody who's having a psychotic break, it helps us to learn how to, helps just the average person who is not a mental health professional learn how to be helpful to that person and keep them safe until we can get professionals on the scene. And yes, we're going to be offering that. We partnered with the city public safety, and so we're going to have a number of people trained by the end of April. We're going to start offering those classes to human service agencies in the community, and then just to individuals who want to learn how to do that. You get certified, you get a card just like with first aid and CPR. It's good, I think, for 3 years, and then every 3 years you come and get a refresher. But
now, could anybody get that training? Like, does he get that
yeah,
training?
anybody can get that training, and we really encourage anybody to get that training because you never know where you're going to be, when you might need that. We know that 1 in 5 people lives with a mental illness at any given time. 1 in 5 people are going to have a diagnosed mental illness. So it's so important to know how to be helpful to people and how to keep them safe and how to direct them to the right resources.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might be interested in actually signing up.
I would love to have you. You'll learn a lot, I promise.
So with the services offered at CMH, can you explain the different departments we have in the agency?
Yeah, so we serve people from, all ages. And so it starts with, we have services for children with autism. We have services for children with serious emotional disturbances. We have services for children and adults with developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities. We have services for pregnant moms who have mental illnesses that make it, that maybe it's going to make it difficult for them to parent or bond with their child. And so we offer services for those women. We have therapy, we have psychiatrists, we have obviously the clubhouse, psychosocial rehabilitation, we have peer supports and a drop-in center. We offer case management, different types of therapies, just a whole range of services to help support people with severe and persistent mental illnesses, kids with serious emotional disturbances, and people with IDD diagnoses.
Okay.
And so, it's just a range of services.
So I know a lot of people aren't familiar with peer support services. Could you explain what that is?
Yes, peers are so important in our service array. Peers are people with lived experience, people who have actually had or still are living with a mental health diagnosis, or they're parents of maybe kids who have mental health diagnosis. And so because they have lived experience, they can sit with a person and know and say, they can just really relate more than, a professional has a certain role, and there are certain things that people who have a degree can do, right? But it's nothing like having somebody who says, oh my gosh, yes, I've been there. I went through mental health. I remember having a case manager. I remember how scary it was when I had to go and apply for this type of benefit. Or I remember when I had to be hospitalized once and how scary that was. And they can help really relate, and they can help give the person hope, because this person who's the peer is in recovery. They've been through it, they've experienced it, and they've come out the other side. And so they can say to a person like, you know what, I know exactly what that feels like. I've been there, and I can tell you it's going to get better. And it's believable because they have that credibility because they've walked in those shoes. So we have parent support partners, we have peer support specialists, we have youth peer support specialists. I think we have about 9 peer support specialists in our agency, and they do a fantastic job. It's a critical role.
I think I ran out of questions.
Well, I would just like to really say that, you know, if you have an opportunity to get to know somebody, if you don't already know somebody who has a developmental disability, or if you're a business and you have the opportunity to hire somebody who has a developmental disability, really it's so great that we now have those opportunities for people in our communities, because like I said earlier, we are all so much better off when everybody has the opportunity to participate and show their strengths to the world. And we're just all better off when we can do that. So take the time to get to know something about Disabilities Month this month, learn, educate yourself, and always, again, if you have an opportunity to hire somebody, please do that. We're always trying to help people have those chances too.
Yeah. And if you need more information about the services at Monroe County Mental Health Authority, you can go to our website, mcmha.org, or you can call 734-243-7340, and they'd be more than happy to help you. That is our show for today. Thank you for joining us. And as always, we want to thank Impact for giving us this platform, Monroe Community Mental Health Authority for supporting us. Lisa's a huge advocate of the clubhouse and the program we're doing. And special announcement, you're hearing it first, Lisa will be doing the show once a month and basically give the State of the Union in mental health for Monroe County and the state. So she'll give you an update every month, be the last Friday of the month. So be sure to tune in for that. And so with that, I want you to be good to yourself and take care of each other. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, and Crossroads Clubhouse is having a pop can bottle drive, and if you want to drop off some pop cans and bottles to our clubhouse, it's at 428 South Monroe Street in the Benish Building at Suite 101. You could drop them off anytime on Mondays between 8:30 and 3 p.m., 8:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. And we're doing this up until whenever we raise enough money to get equipment for our communications program, so we're able to edit our videos and get able to film our own videos as well. So please help us out if you have any.
Yeah, that's any returnable, 10 cents Michigan, bringing them in on Mondays. And you can even call us at 734-243-6401, and we'll come pick them up from you. Mm-hmm. So thank you, we appreciate you. And again, be good to yourself and take care of each one another.